Tim O'Brien is the senior executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion and author of Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald. Karen Friedman Agnifilo served as the chief assistant district attorney in the Manhattan DA's office. Both join me now. Karen, back in 2019, Michael Cohen testified that Trump and Pecker had a lengthy relationship. Have a listen.
I was involved in several of these catch and kill episodes, but these catch and kill scenarios existed between David Pecker and Mr. Trump long before I started working for him in 2007.
Karen, explain to us the significance of David Pecker, in your view, coming back to testify again to the grand jury today.
Yeah, so there isn't a lot of question of fact here about whether or not payments were made. That's all going to be proven by books and records, including the fact that these payments that were made, 11 of them while Trump was sitting president, were made and false entries were made into business records, indicating that these were legal retainers. The question that is really for the grand jury to decide is, was Trump involved in these payments? Did he know about them? Did he know about the purpose? Did he know that these were false entries in the books and records, as well as whether this was to cover up, whether this was to affect the election, right? So those are the two questions that the jury has. And Michael Cohen testified yes to both of those, right? That Trump was involved and that this was in order to influence the election. And as we know, Michael Cohen comes with some baggage and needs to be corroborated. And Robert Costello highlighted that baggage for the grand jury. And David Pecker testified, I think, over 3 months ago in the grand jury. And that's a long time ago. And he can be the one to corroborate both of those facts. He can say, of course, Donald Trump knew and was involved. And in fact, I was doing this because he wanted me to catch and kill these stories. And yes, it was because of the election, et cetera. And so I think the significance is, if there was any question whether or not Alvin Bragg was going to seek an indictment, this tells me that, yes, he's going to ask the grand jury to vote one way or another. He's not going to pull back, and he's not going to not bring this case. He's going to ask the grand jury to vote this case. And I think it'll be potentially this week, since Donald Trump is in New York this week. And for security reasons, I think they're going to want to do that around the time that he's already here.
Tim, I want to ask you about David Pecker, but given what Karen just said, I have to ask you. If Donald Trump is getting arrested this week after his false claim of being arrested last week, if he's getting indicted this week, you know the man. You've been in legal proceedings with the man. What is going through his head right now?
Well, I think he's deeply afraid. Everything. I think there's two things motivating what he's doing right now. Most of every Donald Trump action can either be explained through a lens of self-aggrandizement or self-preservation. He is clearly in self-preservation mode. I think watching Alan Weisselberg, his former CFO, get fingerprinted and perp-walked and handcuffed in front of the media for someone who thrives and needs the media for sustenance. The last thing he wants to be is humiliated in front of the media in a courtroom. And I think he is deeply afraid of that. I think he's also very well aware at this point that even if the institutional Republican Party doesn't fully support him, the far-right MAGA wing of the party does. And he has not hesitated to invoke violence, either by calling for the mob to march in the street or to take a photo of himself holding a baseball bat next to a picture of Alvin Bragg. Again, this is somebody who feels cornered and he's lashing out. It's also what makes him every lawyer's worst nightmare for a client, because the client you'd want in this situation would just keep his mouth shut and not try to intrude on the process. But that's not Donald Trump. I also think there's a political calculation. I think this case, among the four, I think, most potent ones that are in investigations that are leveled at him right now, is possibly maybe the least perilous for him. But I think he is trying to set the stage for all of them to be baseless by going after this one first.
And Karen, Tim mentioned going after it. He mentioned violence. Trump's threats against Bragg, his talk, the baseball bat image, the degenerate psychopath, death and destruction, all of the stuff he's been saying over the last 7 to 10 days. Is that illegal? Can you call that incitement, or is it just free speech?
So a lot of what he says is free speech. But when he did that, when he held the baseball bat to Alvin Bragg's head next to each other, and he called within hours, also talked about death and destruction. There will be death and destruction in the streets. To me, that went from speech to conduct. And at that point, given his history of January 6th and calling, he knows what his supporters will do when he says things like stand back and stand by and go march, and all the things he said on January 6th, and then caused the insurrection to happen and then didn't call anyone off. Him saying that there's going to be death and destruction in the streets is a dog whistle to his MAGA supporters. And as far as I'm concerned, at that point, it went into its conduct. And he is guilty, I would say, of several different New York misdemeanors. I was shocked that I scoured the penal law over the weekend and there's no felony, but he is certainly guilty of at least 3 misdemeanors. Whether the Manhattan DA's office chooses to bring those cases is another story. But if they wanted to, they absolutely could. He crossed a bright red line, and he should be held accountable.
Quick last question to you, Tim. Michael Cohen, David Pecker, Trump uses these intermediaries and then they turn on him because he treats them so badly. Does he get that he's his own worst enemy?
I don't think he cares if he's his own worst enemy. He basically is only focused on what's in front of him for about 5 minutes. He is not a strategist. He is not a long-term thinker. We talked about this before, Mehdi. Anytime there's the word strategy appears next to his name in a story or a headline, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of how he rolls. He is a reptilian survivor, and everything that he does is geared towards his own self-interest and no one else's. The other thing to remember in this case, by the way, is that there is a tape. Michael Cohen taped Donald Trump telling him and directing him to go to Allen Weisselberg to handle the cover-up payment.
Reptilian survivor, there's a phrase for the ages. Tim O'Brien, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, thank you both.